Well, thanks so much indeed. Thank you for coming back for session 4 of this conference. My name's Andrew Pritchard, and I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees for the Town and Country Planning Association. I also, in my day job, work for East Midlands Councils and Transport for East Midlands. This session, as you can see on the screen, is around how can the private sector collaborate and bring forward the voices of children and young people in development and in shaping environments. And I'm delighted to have 3 very eminent speakers here who are going to shed light on this very important topic. First of all, we have Dinah Bornat, who is a director with ZCD Architects. Dinah is one of the leading experts on child-friendly cities, has published research and contributed to books and journals, and is also an advisor to local authorities, and also has done work for the Mayor of London as well. Our second speaker is Johanne Thomas, who is the Regional Director for Communities and Partnerships for Urban and Civic. Johanne is an experienced communications and community engagement professional, working within the housing and regeneration sectors across the public and private sectors, and has been working for Urban and Civic for the past 9 years. And then finally, we have Mike Barclay, who's a director of Ludicology, which is a multidisciplinary team with expertise in research, design, organisational and community development, children's play, play work and risk management. So I'm really delighted to have such a really exciting panel of speakers for this important topic. I'd like now to hand over to our first speaker, Dinah Bornat, who will take us through her presentation. Over to you.
We're quite a small practice, but we do quite a lot of different things. I've come here today to a bit of a sales pitch. Earlier on, I think the website Voice Opportunity Power was mentioned. And in conjunction with a game which Wendy invented, which is a brilliant game that you can play with people who kind of don't really understand how important play is. But I just want you to do me another favour, if that's okay, because I haven't spent the last few weeks updating this toolkit, but somebody in the office has, tirelessly, alongside lots of other things that she has to do. And it's going to, I think, go live tomorrow or next week. And at the moment, it's a series of 5 sessions around youth engagement. And it's called Voice Opportunity Power. And like as if we were at a concert and you're all going to hold up your phones, could you all find it on your phones? I'm going to take a picture of you. I'm going to send it to Nabiha because the poor woman, she's only 24 and she thought she was entering an architect's office. Right, hold up your phones. Show me the website. Yes, come on. I love it. Everyone? Yes? Anyone who's not holding up their phones? Come on. And that means as well, you'll know where to go when it goes live. Thank you. We've been spending a lot of time in the last kind of year or so working quite a lot with the private sector. I think that is not a surprise to a lot of you, but our work around working with young people with the public sector has been a bit quiet, and so have all the architectural projects that we've been working on. It is not easy out there at the moment, but what I'm encouraged by is the fact that big investors and big developers are really interested in this kind of work. I was at UK Reef, which is a big real estate investment forum in Leeds. There was something like 16,000 people there. You can talk about youth engagement now without people saying, but what about, but what about? It's something that people really want to do. This website, it gives you a really simple way of working with young people on what is typically a regeneration project. We've introduced a 6th session because we think it's really useful. The funding's come from Sport England via TCPA. It's really useful to kind of think about working with young people, not just in terms of big regeneration projects, but in terms of small changes that might be happening with them, and that might be to sort of parks and open spaces. So session 6 is much more about not big scale change that might be going on, but things that you might want to do with young people. But you can kind of pick and choose from the toolkit. There's lots of kind of fun and creative things that you can do with young people, ways that you can get them talking about what really matters to them. I'm going to talk about one project that we're working on, which is quite big. It's £8 billion of development over the next 20 years. It's the biggest development site in London, and it's called Earl's Court. On the site of Earl's Court, there's nothing there right now, apart from lots of train lines running through it. So it's jointly owned by TfL and the Earl's Court and Delancey, with lots of money coming in from big pension companies and others. If you ever want to know about how these things kind of work, it is really about attracting long-term investment so that we can get parks like this and social housing built. But what I really like about this project, other than the fact that they told me when they first employed me that it might be for 20 years, which actually was a little bit terrifying because I'm not sure I'm going to be working in 20 years' time. But I was thinking, great, that's something and some people that we can really get to know. And we've been working with them for a while now, and they're really committed to making an inclusive place. We started off, and here's our panel that we're working with. We started off being invited to work with them, to talk, work with young people, because that's what we do. We work with young people. We've written a toolkit. We've done hundreds and hundreds of hours of asking young people what they want. It's incredibly interesting, and I think listening to our first speakers this morning, I would say start with your aims and objectives, and then young people will be coming in and adding to that. They'll be kind of bringing it to life. They will always tell you something new. But you're right, we don't need to be told by young people that they need doorstep play. We know that's important, but we do need to understand what life is like for them, because they don't sit around with us at work while we're drawing. They're not there going, hang on, why have you put that over there? We're not really thinking about them unless we're thinking about our own children, and that's a particular relationship. So we started working with young people, and the Earl's Court Development Company said, how about you bring in some older people as well? And I was like, ooh, they're really grumpy. I'm not sure I want to work with any old people. And they were quite grumpy, but within about 10 minutes, they weren't grumpy, and we were having a laugh. And I was thinking, wow, so the stuff that we do when we talk about play, which I totally borrowed and stole from Mike and Ben, Mike over here, is really replicable with, or transferable with older people. We can talk about thinking about agency and kind of over your own time and space, whatever age you are. So we started having conversations that were with older people that we would normally have with young people. And then we were asked to bring in people with disabilities and carers of children with disabilities. And by this time, we were putting together a panel of 15 people, half of whom are under the age of 18, which has completely changed the way I think about engagement now, and I think has made me think that intergenerational groups are where the future is. So this idea of inclusion and inclusivity with groups of people where conversations are had that are filled with empathy and respect and understanding, and we can listen and learn from those conversations and come back and show them proposals and show them again and show them again, because they've been working with us for 2 years now, and they'll carry on working. The planning application's going in this month, but we're not going to stop. Lots of words here. Massive development site, but I think what's interesting is the amount of time and commitment that the Earl's Court has put into this project, and some of the stuff that we've been doing and some of the research that this panel's been doing wouldn't have happened by consultants. Every single consultant that has come to those sessions has learned something different that they didn't know. The client team is there. The counsellors, not so much, but they are meeting them sometimes. They've been to Parliament. They are being listened to, and it's probably one of the most important parts of the project, and probably, I've been told quietly, why they're going to get planning permission. So that matters, although I would say from an investment perspective, this group of young people, and here's that what once was youth mayor for Hammersmith and Fulham, who's incredible, they're not a planning risk. So I think we need to think really carefully about who we're engaging with and why. We're actually thinking about their future. We're thinking about outcomes. And I got nods in the room at UK Reef. It's not about planning risk. It's about caring about social value. And that's something that investors, I think, are really, really interested in. Some of the quotes. And how much more time have I got? Because I'd really like to show the videos. There we go.
When starting the PRIP sessions 12 months ago, I had no expectations of it whatsoever.
I thought that I could maybe contribute something to the work going on in Earls Court, and that was really exciting.
To be honest, I've never done anything like it before. Never really had a chance to sort of actually put my statement out there. And I thought we'd just like sit down and just discuss it, maybe do like a few quizzes. But it was just way more than that.
So I expected to help change a few small or minor things with the development. However, I've been particularly impressed with the size and magnitude of what we've been doing.
The PRIP process has been more than I could ever have expected.
The team is so united. We know each other well, we can bounce off each other.
It's more of a discussion and more of a kind of like a family, I'd like to say.
And also the level of kind of trust we've been placed with, voicing our opinions on what we really want and almost our demands.
I work full-time on Earls Court, and I think having this kind of regular input and access reminds you about what your role is here, and they're asking for kind of exemplary inclusion as a baseline, like make those really fun and celebrate these things and make them really joyful and like exciting.
We've actually been to the site itself a couple of times. We've also been to other areas where there have been new developments in London, like we visited Elephant and Castle. We also went to the King's Cross, like St Pancras development area there. So it's been like very hands-on from us, like from the panel as well.
Together we had to come up with a story of what belonging and feeling welcome meant to us with our partners who were chosen because they were a different age or a different background, and that was really fun.
It made us think about different people and look at the whole thing from a perspective that we might not normally because of how we interact with spaces, but actually you have to think about how that would look for other people as well.
I think I have more confidence to express myself.
It's really helped me to, even in school, to put a statement out there saying what's good, what I think could be improved.
How I phrase my words and how different people might have different opinions, so I also have to be careful and also listen to their opinions.
I mostly stayed at home. I didn't have much good experience in working before because of my wheelchair, but this has inspired me.
The PRIP has definitely changed how I see London. I think some of the architectural lessons that we've learned have been really interesting. And now I walk around London and just think how much time has gone into everything. And it's definitely made me feel more connected to Earls Court.
That we showed that to a bunch of developers. Seriously. They really want it. They really believe that they need to do more stuff around future generations because that's where investment is. We've started doing another project with the Van Leer Foundation where we're talking about parents and carers of very small children under 5, inspired by the Voice Opportunity Power toolkit. We've said to them, let's do it. Let's show people how to do that kind of work. It involves all sorts of stuff around childcare and food and timings, much different to coming after work and meeting, because you can't do that with small kids. So I think there's so much opportunity in this area. I'm going to finish now, but this is the other side of my work. We want to make places that work for children and young people. We want to build more like the one on the left and build more like the one on the right. In fact, I nipped out to look at a site that hopefully a developer that we're working with will be able to buy that's in Edgbaston. But it relies on the land value. It relies on lots of issues around the rest of the community. That's the kind of outcome we want. We want places like that, but it's not easy. The last slide is a pretend slide of the book. It's going to look slightly different, but this is they're quite clever people in my work. They can make pieces of PDFs look like books. This is a book that we're bringing out next year, which is about how to do this, how to do child-friendly housing, why the history is like it is, how to participate, how to map for it, and then looking at some developments. Really good example of one is here in Portloop, where the 10-point manifesto included the phrase, play out till tea. So those are just, everyone knows what that means. Any potential resident, any potential buyer knows what that means. This is not something that we don't really understand. It's within our gift. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Perfect segue, because I'm from the private sector, from a developer who does really get this stuff, and I'm very proud to be able to come here today and tell you about the great work that the business and myself have been doing for the best part of a decade now. Let me find my deck. There we go. So I'm going to talk to you about a child-friendly approach. But really what it is just an approach, and one which is kind of baked into how we do our work as a master developer. I'm going to just talk around some key points which I've sort of categorised around vision, design, activation, innovation, and then the key message I think I want you to all take away, really, or my takeaway for you, which is around working together for that long term. And that is the thread that runs through all of the examples that I can sort of give you an oversight of today that we do. It's an everyday part of our work, my team's work. And it's because we are working in our places, as sort of Dean has alluded to, as these big developments take 20, actually, I've already been around for 10 years, and we've built about 1,200 homes on a 6,000 home development so far. So really you're talking about 20, 30 years in these places. So it's important that you're building relationships to last. Lots of images throughout, which I'm hoping gives you a sense of scale and the scope of work that we do in this area. Just a quick bit about who we are. We're a master developer of large-scale strategic sites. So our portfolio has at the moment around 14 sites, and 7 are in delivery, so at various stages post-planning, through to the development of 1,500 to 2,000 homes occupied currently, so really established places. Our model is around taking raw land, large urban extensions, new places, new settlements, and we take them through the planning process, and then we infrastructure those, and we remain in them for the life of the development. So that's everything bar the housing. So our product, I suppose, is serviced land, where house builders will come in and build homes, and we will put in green, grey and community infrastructure. That's some of the portfolio that are in development at the moment. So you can see 35,500 consented homes currently. So we're a partner of Homes England. We work really closely with them, and as well as things like Natural England, Sport England, really because our sites offer great opportunities to pilot, to accelerate housing delivery, as well as a raft of other infrastructure. You can see there not an insignificant number of schools and certainly green spaces. So just to talk you through some of the work that we do with community in particular, and young people as being part of that. Quite, I suppose, unashamedly, we start off on these new sites without any community. So you are having to have a really bold vision around how you want, well, understanding who your community is going to be first of all, and then having a bold vision for how you want them to kind of behave in those spaces in those early years. And then really you start to test that when they're getting established, forming community groups and activating those spaces, which I'll come on to. So we start with, I'm going to talk quite a bit about our site at Holton in Rugby, Warwickshire, not too far from here, which is kind of my baby as a site, really. I joined just as that site had outline planning permission. And we really started to think about taking the outline consent and making it work for our early families. So we sorry, close your ears everyone, we messed around with the planning a little bit really early, and we moved the primary school so it had a really good civic presence. We pushed the housing line back to bring some green space. And then we delivered a community hub, which was unobligated infrastructure to create an early sense of community with that all-important early community centre where people could come together. And we did all of that based on our expertise and a good vision for this place that we're creating. And then, we've been really pleased. We've been able to add the photographs around the side there as our community have grown in the space, and they are using it as we hoped. But of course, having eyes and ears on the ground, which my team do, you're able to see and hear how those spaces are really working for people, and how we can build on that for future phases. Excuse me. We've done some really interesting design workshops. So again, that message I want to get across with, we're working out in the community every day with residents and with young people. So we do good examples of design charrettes and design workshops, but these are not isolated activities for us. They're part and parcel of every day. And the relationships we have with our local schools, community groups, means that we can bring people together really quickly and relatively easily to be able to put together really interesting sessions. So the top centre image is a design charrette, which we did intergenerational. Again, we brought together adults and young people, and we threw them into a workshop for the day with a bit of guidance and steer. And really, it was fantastic to see the results coming through, where, it was mutually beneficial, as you would imagine. You've got older people understanding more about where young people are at, aside from what they think their own children want. And we were really able to create some exciting early designs for our district centre in Holton at Rugby. On the bottom right, I'm just picking out a few examples. Recently, we were able to broker a workshop with Chris Boardman as chair of Active Travel England, with some of the children to look at how they travel to school, how do we encourage more active travel, what are those barriers, so he could really understand and hear from those young people their experiences, what the drivers are from their families, and how they can take that back and really help to inform policy. And the top right, I look a little bit different there. That was quite some years ago, and that's really some of the early work that I was doing with local schools. This was way before we had housing, where we were talking about history and heritage, and that's something a lot of our portfolio of sites are former RAF or MOD. At Rugby, it's Rugby radio station, which was a world-renowned transmission site in the 20s. So our sites have got really interesting backstories, and we sort of start there with certainly children and actually older people love to hear about what the sites were before they were allocated for housing, and importantly, how we're going to feed those on into the future. We did some designing houses of the future competitions with some of the children, got them thinking about what does a house look like in 100 years' time. Under the ground was the theme that came through, just who knows. But, really just getting them to think about what we're doing, but in a way that is interesting for them, and gave us some good fun looking at the designs. Excuse me. So activation, this happens all the time. We've got community development workers on our sites whose job it is to just work with community all day long, putting on events, brokering events. So the top right is the youth games that we've done with the local authority over in Corby in North Hants. We've brought Warwickshire Wildlife Trust, which is the bottom right, to do some ecology workshops with local children, looking at wildlife on their doorstep and in their neighbourhoods. The bottom left, we were shortlisted for an award for our community garden design work, which we did, again, intergenerational project, working with our landscape architects to really look at how do we design our community garden space to be accessible and to be inclusive. And then we've done some work with installing a radio station at the local school and some cycling, so you can see all of that. And then innovation, for me, is really around when we go above and beyond again. So that's just really thinking very long term about how do we leave a legacy. And We do lots of work with local colleges and schools to put on work experience, sustained work experience every year. They'll come back, a new cohort, work with our contractors. We broker those relationships to give real opportunity on our sites to get involved and understand more about what we do. Lots of heritage work, as I've said already, where we take the secondary school on our site. At Rugby, we take them to the Science Museum every year in London, which is where the tuning coil that once sat in Rugby radio station is hosted. So we really do help to kind of put down roots and give and leave a legacy, I suppose, for our work long term. I don't want to finish without talking about our PhD project. I did see Jupiter Play are in the room somewhere, but we've sponsored a PhD project, again at Halton Rugby, to look at the fundamental movement skills and the design of play. So that's play equipment and play spaces. So we partnered with Coventry University, and Amy, who's the girl in the blue t-shirt, she's our student, and she's been working, she's in her third year now, so she's crunching all the data that she's collected, looking at play spaces on our developments and external, to really look at how do you make best use of play spaces to improve health and well-being outcomes for children. It's obviously got to be fun, but we want to make sure that with so much play space included in our outline planning permissions, that we're really making those as high quality and high performance as possible. So just final message again, really, which is it's working together for the long term, and it's investment from the private sector. Urban and Civic invested in my role to do communities and partnerships work 10 years ago in Rugby. We do that on every one of those sites that I showed you. And we have community development leads that then work with a team on the ground once we have occupations in our spaces. And I know that all of you know this, you can do really good stuff when you've got people on the ground and you've got time and resources. And I'm very fortunate that we've got that as part of our business model. It's our USP, it's what makes us attractive to work with for local authorities. Because, and again, to cite Dinah, because we care about these places that we're creating and the people that are living in them. Some of the very first residents that moved in at Rugby that I got to know, they were 2-3-year-old children, and they're now at secondary school. So we're now working with them because we know them. What do you want to do now? The swings and the slides are too small for you, or you're too big for them. And it's really that ongoing relationship with them that enables us to design great places. So thank you very much.
We spend a lot of our time researching place efficiency, and much of that is in Wales. Although I should say that we're actually both officially English. So I'm not just here flying the flag for Wales because I'm Welsh. It's because it's really good over there. This presentation is about one case study of us doing place efficiency research at a neighbourhood level. So you've heard some great stuff from Leeds about doing that kind of local authority level. This is about working with a local town and community council and a residents group. But importantly, it's in a more rural context. So much of the literature and research on the built environment and child-friendly cities tends to focus on cities. But surprise, surprise, children who live in smaller towns and villages also live in urban built environments. And significantly, a lot of the research we do is with children who already live somewhere. It's not all about new developments. It's about where people live now as well. So the picture in Wales is a bit different to England. Majority of people in England live in cities. In Wales, you've got about a third of people living in rural communities, so settlements of 10,000 people or less. And rural life is often constructed as somehow safer and better for children. But the reality is that urban problems prevail. So, those idealised visions of these kind of diverse natural environments, free-range children, close-knit communities. If you actually look at the research with children on Rural communities are, those stories are often countered by examples of dullness and boredom and economic deprivation. Often the rural idyll, if you like, excludes those issues of poverty, lack of public transport infrastructure, high-speed traffic, and so on, that affects children in similar ways in more densely populated areas. That said, the best example we've got of place efficiency is from another rurally isolated village in Wales, which I don't have time to tell you about, so unlucky. But it answers all the questions. The important thing is, this is why hyperlocal research with children really matters, because their experiences are shaped by the spatial conditions of their immediate environment. At the same time, we have to position our analysis of children's lives within the wider context in which they take place. So, decisions and actions are made in spaces far removed from children that inevitably impact on their opportunities for play. And of particular interest in that respect is kind of local and national government ideology and policy, which in Wales is quite promising. So Wales, together with Scotland, is one of only 2 countries, as far as we know, that have a statutory duty concerned with ensuring place efficiency for children. And that duty in Wales places statutory responsibility on local authorities to both assess and secure place efficiency for all children in their areas. And they've had that for over 10 years. So, come on, England. And, that duty really follows a history of rights-based policy making in Wales since devolution. You've then got further radical policy making in the case of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which really positions Wales as one of only a handful of wellbeing economies in the world, where wellbeing is about more than, as well as, GDP. And under this umbrella, planning policy in Wales is orientated towards wellbeing, and particularly through the principle of placemaking. So Wales has a placemaking charter, which emphasises the importance of infrastructure, activation and community involvement in the development of spaces, as well as got a shift towards sustainable transport methods through the Wales Active Travel Act. I could go on. However, in this particular research, you also have to recognise it's in the context of over a decade of austerity economics, which has affected people in Wales as much as other parts of the UK. And it's severely hampered the ability of Welsh local authorities to respond to the Welsh Place Efficiency Duty, and the effects of some of that can be seen in this particular community. So our research that we do draws on a range of conceptual tools that have been developed through research into the Welsh Place Efficiency Duty. If I mentioned every time Dr. Wendy Russell influenced our work, I'd say it on every slide, but she's over there and she knows what she's done. So we're working with it as best we can. One of the amazing things about the Welsh Duty is that Play Wales had the foresight to commission research into what happens when you enact such a law across a country. And we've been fortunate to do some of that research with Wendy. At the heart of the Welsh Duty is the principle that where conditions are right, children will play. And the duty of adults therefore becomes one of paying attention to those conditions and working with children to co-creating more favourable conditions for play, which brings us to these dual processes of accountability and responsibility, the ability of adults to take account of conditions children experience in their lives for play and our influences on it, and then use that evidence to respond with the aim of creating better conditions for playing. And these two processes really need to be understood as intertwined. And I think this is really important when it comes to research. You know, that research is itself a response. In Wales, research with children has consistently been a catalyst for actions that adults have then taken. And the action of doing research creates change in and of itself as people are engaged in talking and thinking about children's play, as we'll see, as well as telling you about what else you might do to make things better. And securing play sufficiency through these kind of processes of accountability and responsibility then relies on generating a kind of a collective wisdom, a shared appreciation and knowledge about how we can better support play. It's about recognising that as adults, we all hold different knowledges and experiences about different aspects of children's lives that we can bring to bear in useful ways when working together to improve conditions. But it's also about bringing in children's wisdoms and recognising that children's ways of knowing about their communities are often overlooked, but they are different to adults. And we need to bring in their perspective. Ultimately, play sufficiency is concerned with spatial justice. As Wendy would say, a just organisation of space ensures children have equitable access to the public realm to express their right to play. And the important point here is that spatial arrangements that work well for children work very well for other people as well. So often in our research, and in this particular case, what we actually end up doing is researching play and wider community sociability. It's about everybody's ability to get out and do things together. When producing evidence to inform responses, it's important that research is robust. We've heard lots about research today, which really emphasise its importance. But I think it is important to recognise that there is value in having a research methodology which is transparent, credible, and trustworthy, because people need to be able to have confidence and to trust in the results that you find, because you're going to use this evidence to actually make change for children. And that's why we always employ a kind of mixed methods approach. You know, we're trying to build up a rich picture of what it's really like for children in their local areas. But when we're doing that, it's also got to be practicable and timely. We're currently doing another project with Wendy, funded through the University of Gloucestershire, where we're developing a knowledge transfer partnership version of this work. So we're mentoring local authorities to do this work in other communities, because there's only two of me and Ben, and we just don't like travelling that much, so we just try and support other people to do it. But if you want local authorities to do this stuff, they've got to do it within relatively short timescales and in meaningful ways. We can do wonderful creative research, but if we want to do lots of this, we've got to repeat it in quite short timescales and be able to make responses quickly. So back to this example, what we were really doing was producing localised play sufficiency assessments across 3 neighbouring communities in rural South Wales, and in doing so we combined research methods including online surveys, workshops in schools using creative research methods with children, focus groups with adults, as well as spatial audits in the communities. One of the things we find quite useful is to start by talking to children and adults about their understandings of play. One of the real beauties of the principle of play sufficiency is its ambiguity. What's sufficient? Who should you ask about it? And how do you go about doing that? It requires a kind of research response. And we've always had a strong belief that we should ask children, seeing as it's them that we're trying to support to play. And that includes asking them about their understandings of play. But I think what's also really important is here you start to see these opportunities to reconnect adults to their childhood experiences of play and to make connections between children and adults, to talk to adults about what their experiences of playing were like and to talk to children about what their experiences are like now. And what we particularly find in this community, like many others, is that adult memories of play are often quite synchronous with what children characterise as playing. It's about children talk about freedom and having access to friends and having a laugh and banter and being silly, and how watching TV on your own isn't play, but watching it with your mate is. Or going shopping with your mum isn't play, but going shopping with your mates is. It's about the feeling more than it is about the destination on its own. Where was I? Don't know. Oh yes. So this really emphasises the value of focusing on people's satisfaction with their opportunities for play. Their sense of whether what they're getting is enough. Are they satisfied with it? And we often use online quantitative surveys like this to kind of survey across a population area. These kind of surveys are useful for a number of reasons. They help you to kind of establish generalised levels of satisfaction. They can provide you with a bit of a baseline that you might use again in the future. They help to identify broad factors influencing people's satisfaction. And importantly, they can help you compare between communities, as we saw with Dr. William Bird's evidence earlier. And we were able to compare across the 3 communities here. The results that we found in these communities are pretty typical. One way you could say it is 2/3 of children said their opportunities for play were great or good. Another way you could say that is 1/3 of children are saying their opportunities for play aren't good enough. They're only okay or worse. And actually that rises to about half of children when you get to the kids who are 13 and older. And often the case, what you also then find is, in contrast, you go and speak to parents and they are much less satisfied. So we've got 2/3 of parents saying that their children's opportunities are not good or rubbish. And that again increases for parents of older children and parents of girls. And the difference between children and parents is often for a number of reasons. Children play at times that adults don't recognise. So often we don't account for the fact they play on the bus to school or in the 5 minutes after school while you're at the gate and things like that. Adults often overlook those really important bits of time. Adults often are comparing children's experiences with a kind of quite a rose-tinted, like Tim said, view of the past. But also adults tend to be very focused on the appearance of designated fixed equipment playgrounds. And children are less bothered by that. They're much more concerned with whether you can get to see your mates, access spaces, or as we've had it before, when you go to some of these play areas in rural communities and they look like something out of a post-apocalyptic world. And the kids are like, yeah, but you still play on it. What matters is it's there and you can get to it and your mates are there. Whilst surveys are useful in that kind of generalised terms, they tell us little about the why people report like that or what we might do about it. And that's what we get through the granularity of more qualitative research methods. This is about identifying the specific assets that we should protect and enhance in communities, as well as the constraining factors that we need to address. And in these particular communities, some common themes that came through was a really significant erosion and decline of public spaces for play. So across the 3 communities, the 3 or so designated areas that were for play were characterised by being in a really poor state of disrepair, where more often than not equipment had been removed rather than replaced, or just wrapped up in terms of benches, as well as significant restrictions imposed on what was previously publicly accessible space. So we've got examples where the school fields had been sold off to a farmer, and that a fence had then gone up at the back of the community, meaning children could no longer access space they had done in the past. Or you've got a school here, this was a community school that had a big sign on it saying that after school hours, this is a public open space for playing on. Anybody involved in schools? There's a model there, community-focused schools. That school had been closed and nobody could no longer go on the space, officially. You've also got a loss of childhood freedoms, primarily due to traffic. And all of these issues combine to erode community sociability, which leaves space for fears about other people. So you get quotes like, "We've lost over time the means by which we get to know each other. The closure of the local school was the start of the collapse of our community." You know, these are serious systemic issues that are affecting these rural communities like they do elsewhere. But, as always happens when you research with children, there is also hope. You know, in a sense that change is possible. So despite the constraints imposed on children, they do still play out in these communities. There are examples of that happening. Younger children's play is really constrained to very close to their homes, you know, on the odd cul-de-sac. But there is evidence that adults want to support that to happen but can't allow them to go much further. So you get kids playing at one end of the road, and 300 metres down the road, they're like, "Yeah, we don't go down there because we don't know who lives there. There's only 30 houses on the road." You know, the level of fear is such that you can't even go to the end of the road, but they do at least play out where they are. However, you have got to be significantly older to get to the point where you've got the freedom where you can really go and make use of all of the other local affordances. So for teenagers, when we ask them to do maps, their maps look much more varied and interesting, and they are off making the use of these wonderful assets that you sometimes get in more rural areas, you know, like the Monkey Bridge. You can guess what that is. The castle, it's not a castle. The old school, it is an old school. The field, it's a field. The stream, that's a stream. You know, older children who had significant level of freedom are able to reel off a load of places where they can go, but younger children are now, you know, even at the end of primary, are not perceived old enough to get off the estate, because what surrounds the estate is a really fast road. You've got to be old enough to negotiate that stuff. What we then do is we can use the insights from this research to develop a design brief for community planning. So we brought community back together, and this was a collaborative effort of community residents to respond to this evidence-based design brief. And what matters is that they really believe in the design brief. You know, it's empowered by the fact that it's supported by real-life evidence from their communities. And they were kind of tasked with, addressing these 3 strategic priorities, which were developed from the priorities children identified. So we did an activity with children, getting them to develop their own design brief, positioning things in what order they think matter most to them. And typically children put things like access to friends, freedom to move around, and the kind of appearance of their community above and beyond the swings and the slides and the climbing frames, although those things matter as well. And what we got through then, these kind of community planning workshops, is this kind of concept design. So each community ended up with one of these in this place. And if you look across the 3, I mean, this looks very similar to a slide that Jenny Wood shared earlier. It's almost like we're kind of doing the same kind of work. What you see across these 3 communities, they're characterised, perhaps unsurprisingly, by a real emphasis on creating traffic-free, low-traffic routes that enable children and other residents to access a much broader range of playable spaces. This is really Tim's idea of, turning the playground inside out. It is about, having said that, it is about having designated places for play, which serve as landmarks and places for meeting up, but it's also about opening up possibilities for a whole range of other more informal spaces, which importantly don't need lots of equipment on them. It's about simple landscaping that makes the space a bit playable and is also pretty low maintenance stuff, as well as opportunities to find seating and shelter. And again, that's important, not just for children. And it's then about how you encourage people to use it, because it's all very well building the environment, but you've got to remember there's a culture here of not playing out. We've got to activate that. So, it's about having a water slide on the big field every summer that gets everybody out using the big hill that's there, and hopefully other things come from that. So what we have here is an example of, localised place efficiency assessments, generating evidence to inform strategic localised approaches to urban planning. and that involving children, young people and adults in that process can form the basis of placemaking with plans aimed at improving conditions for play. And I'll just end by saying, I think, as well as giving these communities a plan to work with, perhaps what is most important is, again, what happens in response to people being involved in this process, people's collective sense that change is possible. And we know in these communities, it was actually only a few weeks after we'd been there, we saw a picture on social media where the community had taken it upon itself and they'd recruited a local farmer who was then, with his tractor, digging a new footpath alongside by the road. I don't know if they were allowed to do it, but they were cracking on anyway. They've also used this evidence to then secure further funding to realise more of these plans. So, this kind of work can act as a catalyst for change. But as I said, what we're now looking at is how we can support other people to adopt this approach by mentoring people with what we consider a tried and tested methodology for producing localised place efficiency assessments, but enabling people to do that in places that they already know and work. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you. We've got a time now for a bit of Q&A. I thought those were really three excellent presentations. I took away three things really from that. One is the importance of research, both qualitative and quantitative. What's good for kids is obviously good also for lots of other people as well, which is great for everyone. And finally, there are commercial models that you can deliver this at a practical level to the benefit of everyone as well. So I thought they were three excellent presentations. A short period now for questions.
And we've talked a lot about today designing in things for children and youth in our communities. And I'm just curious if you've run into, through working with young people, them discussing things that actively design them out of communities. So whether it's like ableist environments or things like curfew orders, public space orders, things like that, and how that kind of, how you try to navigate that part of the planning process.
Quite often we work with schools, and we told the local authority that all the children at Holland Park School were banned from going to McDonald's, and the local authority was like really quite upset about that, because they thought that they realised that that's actually a justice issue and wasn't reasonable for that to be the case. I've also spoken to, actually going into my son's school, he goes to a very strict academy, and their teachers patrol the area around the school for any misdemeanour you could imagine. It's like the opposite of play. And teachers were really shocked to hear that the girls were getting catcalled whilst this was going on. So I think sometimes adults don't even realise what's happening under their noses. And it takes us to go in and start just chatting to kids about what their experiences are like in the local area, where they're going, what's kind of, whether they're getting stop and searched. And then to play that back to some of the adults who obviously have their children's best interest at heart, but may be focused on other issues. And so I think all of this needs to come out when we're talking to planners, and particularly because they might be thinking outside the development area. I think probably, I don't know if it's the same for you, Mike, but we find these stories come out again and again, and you feel like you're the sort of conduit for kind of playing that back.
There's so many of those examples, and I think it's about both things. I think you've got to be able to identify things that are good assets, because sometimes, it can all seem pretty depressing when you get caught into, this sense that childhood is in crisis in some ways. And I think it's really important that we highlight things that are working and encourage people to protect them. And then balancing that with, not shying away from saying, but these are the major constraints. And some of that, is to do with particular restrictions on play, no ball game signs, lack of access to land, and hopefully people can negotiate some access arrangements for children. But I think it's also about, we've been doing research recently, in another Welsh community where you can't get away from the fact that children there are very severely constrained by the fact that there are extremely high levels of concern around community safety, which is absolutely justified due to drug and alcohol abuse. And these are not easy things to fix. And they're not, they don't immediately seem directly related to play, but they absolutely are fundamental to children being able to get out in their communities. And what you've then got to do is present that back to people, to a much broader range of people who might be able to do something about it. There's no easy fix to that, but you can't get away from it. It doesn't matter how many swings and slides you put in. We need to deal with the actual issues that these families are experiencing, which are preventing them from using the public realm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fences have become a real issue for us around play. Really basic stuff, the multi-use games areas. Again, it's not new that they can be a deterrent for certainly girls coming onto multi-use games areas, and so that kind of keeps the ball in and keeps girls out is an anecdote I've heard. And then the same sort of principle around play areas and play parks. So that's something our PhD study has really picked up, which is how children interact with the non-play equipment. So just boulders, rocks, undulating landscape. Clearly, when you pen them in, then that's, they're all fighting for the swings and the slides. And it kind of makes total sense. But as someone that hasn't worked in play design or anything prior to the PhD, it's just really basic stuff. But yet the procurement of play areas is still based on, a rectangle, that safety aspect, which comes back to the parental perception. So those are just, that's just one thing. And also footpath material is a real deterrent for children cycling and walking to school more. A really basic thing we can change almost immediately in new place design.
Hi, I'm from Public Health, and I've been really inspired by the great examples of developers being active in this space and really prioritising developing for children and for play. But I'm interested to ask a question around health inequalities. So I work a lot with planning authorities within my area. My area has a number of communities that feel left behind, ex-mining rural communities. And when I speak to developers about our aspirations for building health in, when I speak to the planning authorities about, what can we get developers to do in that space, the answer that I hear back and again is developers will be driven off if we put all of these expectations in place. Actually, the driving need is we need more homes and we need them built. So there is a feeling that if we ask and have aspirations around these things, actually developers will say, no, you want it affordable, that's not going to be affordable, it's not going to be viable. Now, I'm hearing that from planning authorities, and I'm really interested to hear from yourselves as developers when it comes to the communities that maybe are deprived, left behind, in greatest need of really affordable housing. Does that argument stand up, or are there opportunities for developments of the kind that you aspirationally showed us today?
That's a great question.
The kind of places and spaces we're creating tend not to be regeneration in nature. So we're looking at a slightly different demographic. However, I think what we have been able to showcase through the development we've done so far and just good placemaking is that there are lots of opportunities for spaces where you can activate it for health and wellbeing outcomes. So we have a real issue with developing health facilities, but that's probably another conference for another day around how we engage colleagues around that. But what we are doing and showing on our spaces is how we can design play spaces to really look at fundamental movement skills in children at a young age. How do we make interventions through play that can make a difference to health outcomes? We activate some of our green spaces and green corridors, which have an ecological purpose in planning, but can have exercise equipment of varying styles to encourage more activity in our spaces. Obviously, the creation of natural play that can really challenge physical activity, and then this really crucial aspect of active travel and how do we get people out of a car when this place has been designed to all be accessible on foot and bicycle, which is an ongoing challenge. We haven't got a magic answer for, but we are really working hard with schools in particular to really try to bring about habit changes and behaviour changes. And we have hosted workshops with OHID, I think they're here as well, Sport England, Active Travel England. They're really looking at how good design can really encourage more health outcomes. But it'd be really great if we could get a few more health facilities in as well to complement that, because that still is the number one thing people look for when they're thinking about their health and well-being. They really want that blue sign.
So I think what you're saying is it doesn't necessarily cost you more to do this stuff. It's just how you do it. Is that what you're saying? Or is there a premium?
Yeah, I think my colleagues would probably tell me it costs a little bit to do some of this stuff.
Yeah.
But it has, you've got a commercial return as well. If you can say to people coming to look around a place to live with their family that the play spaces have been designed to enhance fundamental movement skills for your children, it's a real winner. That's going to be something you take away thinking about for your children. And, being able to see green spaces with interesting features that are designed for you to be active. We all aspire for a life where our children walk and cycle to school every day. So those things have a commercial return for us, no doubt. So even if they cost a little bit more to deliver, but again, I'm conscious we have that long-term view as a developer that is not necessarily shared by some of our house building developers that have a far shorter business model.
Dinah, you were itching to get in there.
Brilliant point for me to come in about the house builder model, because it's massively inefficient. So from a cost perspective, you can get more homes onto a site that if you want to, that's not primarily designed around the car. But the house builder model is not really around layout, it's around the delivery and the supply chain. It's very localised and it's not shifting. So what needs to happen, I think, is that we need a fundamental understanding of what it is we're talking about today, which I'm just going to say from the perspective of where I am, it's doorstep play. That's the most important thing. It's what came out of the work we did with Ludicology around plasmatic, if that's what you were talking about earlier on, that you weren't going to mention. Is that right? Oh, but that as well, yeah, that as well. So their work around talking to children about play sufficiency went completely correlated with our mapping. If there's doorstep play, if you move the cars out of the way, then children will go and use that space. They'll play out and parents will let their children play out and they will meet other parents and communities will be stronger. We used to design like that. Back in the day, but we stopped and cars got bigger and roads and highways design got more kind of formulaic. So we need a shift in the way that we design developments, and it isn't really, actually, I don't think, and I'm going to go against what you just said there, I don't think it's about the quality of the play equipment either. It's actually about the space right outside your door. I mean, I was in a community recently in Dublin, could have been anywhere, where, brand new layouts of homes, blocks, all sorts of different typologies. But you've got home, car, road, play space. So the age at which your child is going to go and play out is going to be significantly higher than if it was home, play space, car, road. It's just that simple. And when you say that to people and you say, would you rather have the car or the child in front of the home? They've said the answer before you've got to the end of the last word. They don't want the car in front of the home. These are parents of small children who, and why is it that we're accepting this kind of development in our local areas? Why are we saying it's okay? It's not about the stuff that's coming out at the moment. I'm sorry to say, but I'm going to say it. It's not about beauty. It's not about that. It's really, really simple. And we've got to get off this kind of agenda that's about satisfying local people to make buildings look nice. It's about making places where children can play outside, where there's shared space. And that challenges some people because shared space is not necessarily aspirational. Cars are aspirational. Homes are aspirational. Land is aspirational. And children are losing out in the battle of the economics here. And there's a huge number of people I did a calculation, made this one up. 35% of the population is either a child or the primary carer of a child. That's a significant group of people that's being impacted by this. There are more people who are carers associated with that child. Why are we serving them so badly? I don't think it's about money. I think it's about other big things. And I think we need to just spell it out. We really need to spell it out. Get really good at reading developments and seeing what's happening and see where that doorstep space is, because if you had it on your doorstep as a child, you will have played out on it. You'll know that.
Is it better in Wales, Mike?
No, I'm not. I think the policy framework is better in Wales. I don't know if I don't know if the policy framework I was saying I think is better in Wales. I don't know that the built environment is particularly any better, although I can give you some examples of places that work really well. I think the thing I would say is, and we were talking about this earlier, is we need more examples of places that are already built that work really well for children. We spend a lot of our time talking about what is wrong for children. We've got a pretty good sense of what the problem is. What we really need to show is some real-life examples of places that work, and there are places out there, and we need to show developers, local authorities, look, here's an example where you have got a load of people that live and kids play out. And it's quite difficult to come by those. Anecdotally, people tell you about them, but I want to see actual mapped pictures of particular places that we can show people and go, build it like this. And I'm convinced there's places like that in the UK, but we just everybody needs to put their hands up and tell us where they are.
Lots of discussion around play and children here today, but the cohort maybe less spoken about were young people, thinking about sort of that post-primary age. And would love to think, the McDonald's example really just sat with me as well. Young people are often demonised for just being themselves in communities because there are no spaces for them. I just wondered if there were any examples from the panel of developments either in process or already created where spaces have been made for that young people cohort, where they successfully feel like they own that space and use that space in that way, so they aren't banned from the local McDonald's or similar spaces.
It's a live challenge for us at the moment. As I said, our early families living in our developments, their children are now growing out of play parks. And we're looking at what sort of spaces can be created for young people, and what do they want and where can we place them within the designs. And, there's always a fixation on skate parks. I don't know if that's, everyone, if you say something about young people, they jump to skate parks, and I'm sure that's in the absence of other ideas. So we're looking at that, and I was in a session with South Cams at local authority looking at youth. We were talking about the old youth centres where they're a real example of kind of lots of external funding over time, bolting on different provisions. And it gave us some thinking around designing spaces that could be added on in due course. Obviously, there's an element of what you're obligated to deliver as part of developments, and we've obviously got our eye very firmly on that, but we can design spaces that then a community group, organisation or local authority could add on to in due course to create new interesting spaces over the course of time. And we do that with schools and things that have to expand. So that was something we were thinking about we could do with spaces. Creating early community space, community being everyone, is something that we've done on all of our developments, and that enables us to do. We've done some youth sessions with a local youth group that came and did some kind of gaming evenings and really started to think about some of the things that young people want to do in the evenings, but perhaps don't want to do always at home, and they want to come together, meet their friends, and all the stuff we've heard today. So those are, again, creating spaces for people to come together that are inside as well as outside is something really important to us, and that helps all community groups of different ages. Just on the aspect of doorstep play, we've got lots of doorstep play around our developments as well as the larger play areas. So we're lucky in that we're designing a place that has all of those aspects in it. But what societally, what we've picked up is that there's still, if you've got young children, then you're absolutely fine with young children making a noise under your window or just next to you. But it can cause some tensions. I think we've gotten so used to children being over there playing that actually it does create some community tension for us a little bit. Few complaints, quite a lot of complaints. Can we get some no ball signs? So, you know, it's even with a new community like we have, where it's clearly designed in. And I think what house builders, and I'm not here to defend them in any way, they'll always be driven by the house buyers. So whilst I don't disagree at all that, you know, the play and then the car, but I think until we as a house buying public really push more, then, you know, that they'll always lean on that they'll build what they can sell.
Okay. Final comments from Mike and from Dinah at all?
Just in response to the issue on provision for young people, older children, I think a big issue is, and this is the issue for everybody, it's about spaces, not space. I think the communities where there is a real variety of accessible spaces, many of which don't need to be designated for playing, what we found is in those communities, different ages of children are able to negotiate who they share space with. So you can co-opt a space for a period of time, and all right, that might be where the older ones go, and you don't go there when you're younger, but you'll get to when you get older. They're able to kind of, develop their own culture around these spaces. The problems we have is when there is, only a space, and everybody's got to try and use that together. It's a bit like if you make all adults try and use the same space together. Ben's analogy is always that, like adults always get a variety of pubs to go to, don't we? But kids have one place and they all have to share it at the same time. And lots of other people want shelter and seating, an actual shelter that does protect you from the wind and rain, not like a fake shelter, basically, that doesn't protect you from anything. Lots of those around a community, and, older young people will find places that they can co-opt. Although at the same time, we would also be massive advocates for improved staff provision, and we should bring back more play work and youth work.
Okay. Dinah, last word to you.
I think that's absolutely right, both those points. Variety, because I think the interesting thing about older children is that they are looking to really kind of sort of navigate between being, doing sort of adult-style things and child-style things. Maybe that's a bit of a kind of oversimplified way of putting it, but playing in playgrounds is still really popular, but also having a nice quiet space to sit with your friends is also really popular. And to be able to do all of those things in one day, not just like, I want that space and that's for you. Variety, I think, becomes much more important as you get older and kind of reach. I think that I think you're right about the house builders, but I do also think that there's a bit of a blind spot because that question's never asked. And actually we squeezed it in once into a survey, how important is it that your local area, what did we say? Children can play out. And it was really interesting because when we put it into a UK GBC max diff survey, so 3,000 people were asked this question, and I asked after they'd started the service, they had to start it again, which is a bit irritating for them, and they said, isn't that the same question as, is there a green space nearby? And I said, no, it's not the same question. It's a very different question. But actually, it's a really recognisable question, and it came up really high in terms of residents valuing that, higher than a house that would go up in value and having a south-facing garden. But if you don't ask that question, you won't know the answer. But anyway, back to teenagers. I think you're also right. I think it's always been the way that as they get bigger and they get louder and they get kick balls harder, presumably, this has always been a challenge, hasn't it? How we live together, and actually, as the developments become denser, which they are in London, densities are extremely high. We are going to have to get cleverer at looking after young people as they get bigger and think about how we can support them. So I think we, in the planning system, we need to build in exactly what you're saying, Mike, because going back to that earlier point, for some young people, it's even harder and more of a challenge if they don't fit in. So, the world is a difficult place for them to navigate. And if we don't have I think somebody talked about this earlier, kind of trusted adults in roles that can support them in good ways, then they will just retreat home. And that's where this whole conversation about the kind of social media generation, which I'm not a massive fan of actually as a conversation, I think is part of this. This is the issue. So I think we need to really think hard about high density developments and think about how we can support children and young people, particularly older children who we want to be independent but are basically retreating home because it's so tricky out there, I think.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, that's been a really insightful conversation, lots of really good stuff there. Can we thank our three speakers?
So it just falls to me to say thank you to all of our speakers and to those who chaired sessions for us today. Very big thanks as well to Sport England for their support in sponsoring the conference, which meant that we could invite all of you here for free. And I know in the landscape that you're all working in that is very welcome. And thank you as well to the TCPA staff behind the scenes who have worked hard to make today happen. I could say so many things. My head is sort of buzzing with all the things that we've been talking about. And I'm aware that we didn't even cover everything. So there's just so much to do here. But I think I would just reflect on sort of where we started in the sense that we talked about Colin Ward and actually how this is a social justice issue. There was quite a lot of anarchy in the room about doing things without permission and not waiting for policy and not waiting for any new government to catch up with us. And I thought that was really interesting. And also, I think that it's about moving from those exceptional things that we get to point to and how do we make those things universal so that actually this isn't a conversation anymore. So I think I'm going to go home and I'm going to think about what is a sufficient response from today from the TCPA, and that's what, the joy of my job that I'll get to think about. But actually I would ask you all to do the same. Actually, what is a sufficient response from you in relation to everything that you've heard today? And they may be big actions, they may be small actions, but it's just a really great way of thinking about it and a really great personal challenge. So could I ask, if you have a chance, there are some QR codes around the place for a little bit of feedback. I think it's just 3 or 4 questions. And also, if you could return your badges, there should be someone with a bag because we like to reuse them as much as we can. So if you could do that for us as well, that would be great. Please stay in touch with the work of the TCPA. This is just the beginning of this conversation and this project for us. We have 2 more years of funding that we need to figure out what we're going to do with in terms of children and young people. And we would love to hear all of your ideas as we sort of shape what that's going to look like and how we can facilitate support for all of you through that. So thank you all for coming, making the journey, and I hope you have a safe trip home. Thank you.